Would you mind introducing yourself for the audience, please?
Well, hello, and thank you for inviting me. I am Aimee Perrin. I am the widow of Dennis Perrin, a fairly well-known artist. He painted for about 40 years and died in 2021. We were married for 42 years, and I was the artist. Between the two of us, I had a degree in art when we got together, and we met in college. And he had a degree in psychology. And we both graduated in 1976. I'm 70 now. And we were busy trying to make money. We had started a family, trying to figure out what we wanted to do next. I wasn't really painting actively because we had a newborn child, baby, and Dennis was he was working construction. He worked for his dad, building houses, but it wasn't as fulfilling as he wanted. So he was kind of asking the universe for a direction one day while he was sitting at a bookstore, and asked the universe, is there something I can do to make money for my family in a way that I could love? And in the past, he had done a lot of creative writing, and of course he was a builder, and he just assumed it would be something like that. And he was suddenly got the desire to draw something. So he picked up a magazine and a piece of paper and a #2 pencil, and he drew a face from the photograph. And he brought it home to me. I had the art degree. He's like, I don't know how this happened. And it was pretty good. I mean, it was really good. So I'm like, that's really good. Next time. And I gave him a few pointers about drawing and, kind of shake your hand a little bit so it's not as tight and stuff like that. So he drew some more, and then he drew some more. And basically, as we say, the rest is history. He got consumed by a fire to draw, and then drawing became doing pastels. And then suddenly he was painting with oils. And in just a few months, he was better than I ever was. And I had spent my entire life drawing and painting. So that was very interesting. And so we decided we had no choice but for Dennis to become a full-time artist. And what happened was he hurt himself at work. He hurt his back. He could no longer work construction. He basically was trying to recover from this back injury. It was just from chronic. It wasn't like an injury. It was just painful. And so we basically sold all of our possessions that were sellable, and he started painting full time. He wasn't in galleries. He was selling a painting here and there. We were, as they say, dirt poor. But it just got better and better, and he got better and better. And it was amazing. Within about, he started painting in about, well, I shouldn't leave this part out. He enrolled in the New Orleans Academy of Fine Art in, I think it was probably 1982. And he studied with Del Weller, a teacher there that he got very close to. He studied with Del for 2 years. And then all the rest of it was self-education. I'm kind of getting out of order, but I'm trying to figure out. In 1985, I got pregnant with our second child, and he started painting me. He started painting figures because there I was, Madonna and Child. So it was like, what else are you going to do if you're a painter, right? So he started painting me in 1985. And that became nearly a full-time job for me, posing every day. And with my art background, my degree, I was very comfortable kind of figuring out what the best poses were, or, we kind of collaborated because I already had an art education. We collaborated on these early paintings, and it was a very exciting life. Anyway, after he had painted for several years, he decided he would like to teach, and he got a few students and realized that what the biggest problem that students have in painting is palette, what he ended up calling palette discipline, and understanding how to create a painting, and wanted to develop a method. So he spent the next few years developing his method in a way that not just that he could present to students. And then he started working on these courses, and I videoed him while he was creating the courses. So he's created, I just wrote down all the different ones, but I think there's 17 courses that we created over the next 5 years. And it's really fun that we have that now because, well, he's gone. And there's a whole lot more that I could say about that, but it's fun to be able to still watch him paint. And every time I got to see him paint, I've watched so many demos that he's done on the courses. Plus, we traveled for 5 years from, I believe it was 2016 to 2020. We traveled doing live workshops. And we've met people all over the world in the live workshops, and that was a whole lot of fun. And I've watched every demo he's ever done, thousands, and it was like watching performance art. It was so much fun, and he was so good at taking questions while he was painting. And kind of a funny story about that is when we lived in New Orleans before he became a painter, he was a tour bus driver for several years, which is a lot of fun in New Orleans. But he got really good at, when you're stopped in traffic on a tour bus, you've got to fill in the space with talking, and people are asking you questions, and you're driving in city traffic. He got really good at that, which translated to when he painted, he could paint and demo and talk and answer questions at the same time. And it's always a lot of fun to watch his demos, which all the courses all have demos in them.
I hope you don't mind me asking, how is it that Dennis died?
He was diagnosed in March of 2021 of colon cancer. And he was trying to treat it naturally with diet and meditation. Meditation. And he died in November of 2021.
It sounded like you were, just on a roll, both of you, with, your lives, and just really had this rhythm with each other. So it's really sad that it was interrupted that way, but it's still a lovely and amazing story. I thought it was fantastic to hear how he became an artist and how you were obviously there to encourage him at the start. So is there anything more about that which you can talk about, the early days of him developing as an artist? Did you paint together, for example?
No, we did not paint together. No, we didn't really paint together. I dabbled in art for many, many years, but I was busy raising our 3 kids and homeschooling them. And it was really fun because Dennis was pretty much always around because he was a painter and painting at home or in a nearby studio. So we were all kind of going on adventures together. And then I was posing almost every day for many, many years. As a family, we would go, we started in Louisiana. We moved to Maine in 1991. 1991. And it's a funny story. We were trying to decide where we wanted to move. We just needed something new. He had painted in Louisiana. It's a different kind of climate there. It's very hot and humid, and there's not much blue water. We had traveled to Florida and had done a lot of painting on the coast with white sand and blue water. And in Louisiana, if you want to paint, next to a pond or something, it's all green. And the ground is so flat that behind you, there's just green trees, and you can't get like blue sky and blue water anywhere. And we were like, maybe we should just move. And the year that we decided to move, it had rained 131 days in a row. So we couldn't paint outside because it was raining every single afternoon. So we just said, okay, we're just going to move somewhere where there's more art. Dennis loved the American impressionist. So the Boston 10. So we were kind of attracted to that area of that kind of art. But we had also traveled to South Carolina, to Charleston, and we liked that area too. And it's, close to the coast. So I wrote a letter to the Chamber of Commerce for Charleston, South Carolina, and Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And we picked Portsmouth because a friend of ours lived half the time in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and half the time in New Orleans. And she said, it's a place you would love. So we go, okay. So I mailed letters telling them that we're thinking about moving to the area. What could you help us with? And we got nothing back from Charleston, South Carolina Chamber of Commerce, sorry to say. But we got a huge packet from the Portsmouth Chamber of Commerce, Portsmouth, New Hampshire Chamber of Commerce, with newspapers and magazines and brochures about places to go and things to see. And we're like, oh, I guess we're moving to Portsmouth, which is right across the river from Maine. And we ended up finding a house in Kittery, Maine, because it was easier to find a house there. And it was a walking, walked across the bridge, you could be in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So that's where we ended up. And I don't remember your question, so I don't remember what I'm leading to.
I was just asking about the early days of him painting. And
oh, yes. Well, we just painted. He painted. Oh, and okay. So I did some watercolor. I did colored pencils. I wasn't really going to paint when he was painting me, but it eventually got to where about. I'm not sure when it was. Let's see. It was about 2016. I decided that Dennis was painting flowers more. So I wasn't as involved. I wasn't modeling quite as much. So I decided to start painting again. And because I hadn't painted in so long, I decided to paint mostly food still life, because that was kind of in. And that time people were painting egg still lifes or foods, So I started painting food, and then I branched into coffee and tea, little still lives. So that's my art. And funnily enough, because when I painted in the past, I had not used Dennis's method because I was trained, in college. And I didn't really have a method. So when I filmed all of his courses, I was like, okay, at first I was afraid to use his method because I didn't want my paintings to look like his. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to use this method to learn how to paint. It's a very simple method. which I can get into, but I started using his method, and my paintings, they look okay, but they look nothing like his, which I was not that I mean his art is gorgeous, it's beautiful, it's stunning, it's amazing. I still don't understand how he really did it. But I didn't want my art to look like that, and it doesn't, because it's my art. And that's what Dennis always wanted to do in his courses, is to teach people to have their own voice and their own art, so that his students' art didn't look like his. And I think that somehow Dennis's temperament of he was very intelligent, and he learned really fast. I'm kind of a slow learner. I have to do a lot of repetition to learn, but he learned really fast, and he was able to synthesize ideas into an easy way to understand. So he was a very gifted teacher as well as painter.
That's fantastic. So before you get into his method, do you remember what method you were using before you tried Dennis's method? I know you said it wasn't a method, but there must have been some natural approach that you had adopted or developed yourself.
Not really.
No.
Not really. I mean, no, and it wasn't a method. It was, I went to 4 years of art college. I went to college, and back then it was 1972 to 76. There was a lot of modern art, but I always loved representational art. But it was kind of haphazard. You just mix your colors and try to match what you see. That was about all the direction that I got in college. You just paint what you see. Just paint what you see. Yeah. And I will say that some of the things that I learned in college, I passed on to Dennis, which is kind of interesting. And I was quite a strong critic. If he would come in with a painting, and I didn't see it, I didn't think that it was quite right, I would tell him. And we didn't really argue, but I was a kind of fierce critic. But I think along with my ability to see what was really good and what worked, it was good for him. And we worked together with that. And it's pretty interesting how it all happened. But yeah.
What would be, would it ever be the case where you'd come in and it's only a small amount that's wrong with the painting, say, color matching or, shape design, or so? What would be the kind of critiques that you'd give? Would it always be the whole painting you just don't like, or would it be there's only certain things that I think don't work in the painting?
I think it would vary, and I'm trying to think. I mean, usually it wasn't anything in particular. I'm not sure I can even answer that question. I think it was just general. Dennis had a gift of really getting things right. He had an incredible eye. But sometimes something was a little off, like maybe that doesn't really look straight when it ought to be straight. Maybe something like that, or maybe a highlight could be lighter, But I mean, eventually he needed. I mean, it was mostly in the beginning when it's really kind of funny. Probably the most important critique I ever gave him was when he came to me with his first flowers. And I said, they just don't look like flowers. They look like they're made out of metal. And he was very hurt by that. But he studied it and tried to figure out why. because he agreed they weren't great, but it was like, he'd only been painting for a few years, and this vase of flowers looked like they were made out of metal. What was that all about? Well, it was about value and gradations of value, and that value in a flower, the gradations of value are extremely slight and very, very gradual. And even though the darks in a white flower can be very, very dark, there's still a very gradual change from dark to light. And you have to be very careful with that. I can't really think of anything else specifically.
That's knowledge of texture, though, which is, again, a reason why you're such an asset to, by his side to do these things. And would you, because my older brother's an artist, and he and I, when we are in either galleries or museums, we'll critique, the classics, because we'll look and, it's amazing painting that neither of us could do, but we'd still like to pick certain aspects, and it's not even necessarily a criticism, it's more just an analysis. Would you do that together, or like of other artists, would you be in museums and galleries and be able to discuss art in a critical way like that together?
Sure. Yeah, we really did love the same paintings very much. So we would visit we got to go to the Soroya, Wahim Soroya exhibit. I can't remember what city it was in, somewhere. And it was a huge exhibit. And there was one of the rooms had like 300 studies, very tiny studies. And then the other rooms had these giant paintings that, you see them in a book. They're like this big. And then you see that Soroya, it's like, 10 by 10 is this huge 10 feet by 10 feet. I don't know meters, but, it's a huge painting. And we would stand in, our poor kids were so embarrassed. We would stand in front of these paintings and just weep, because it's so moving to see a painting that you've loved in a book and then to see it in real life was such a huge experience that we shared. Our kids would go sit in the corner, or they go into another room, because we always had to take the kids with us, We were traveling and the kids came with us to all the museums, and they were like, oh God, here they go again. And we were like, tears streaming down our faces. Yeah, that's a very fun memory, though.
Yeah. Well, having someone who you trust give you an honest critique is really valuable. So I know that was something that he would have really appreciated, I'm sure. So yeah, what is do you remember any of the things that you passed on to Dennis that you'd learnt in college and art school?
Well, I had a teacher who was very strict and very old-fashioned, and believed in limited palettes, that you didn't buy a tube of paint for every color that you wanted to have. You didn't have 100 different colors. We were allowed, when I painted in college, I was allowed white and 3 different yellows and 3 different reds and 3 different blues, and nothing else. So that is one of the things that I passed on to Dennis, and he agreed. I mean, it wasn't like he just took it hook, line, and sinker. He agreed with the method, and he used it, although he did choose eventually to use only 1 yellow for some reason. But he always had 3 reds and 3 blues, and using a primary color palette is he really believed in. And he didn't just believe it. He tried out all the burnt this and umber that. He tried them out and didn't like the results. So he ended up agreeing with what I had said in the beginning, that you don't need secondary colors or tertiary colors.
That's a great tip to pass on. because you can mix every color with the primary colors as it is, and it's a better knowledge base that you'll have, and it'll probably be a lot more harmonious as a painting with just those colors as well.
Right.
So,
When you,
yeah.
sorry.
No, please.
Well, when you can mix a true neutral from primary colors, you know how to paint.
Yeah. Yeah. So is there anything else like that that you can remember? Because these things are so useful for the viewers, the listeners, for myself, and I'm fascinated in anything which you learn, when you were in school that you could then gift to Dennis before he became this, famous painter that he became.
I think that one of them is to always paint from life. And he agreed with it and used it and always painted from life. There's a couple of times because he was asked to do portraits of people that had already passed, so he had to paint from a photograph. Or if he was asked to do a portrait of a child, he would do some live sittings and some from photographs. But 99% of the time he painted from life. And the other one is using natural light. So it was always light from a window or a light from, if you were painting outdoors, it was always natural light. And he actually took that even farther to understand how to control the light. You don't want a studio with a lot of windows, or if you do, you're going to block most of the windows so that you are the controller. You're God in your universe. So you control the light. You don't let the light control you. And that's a big one. I will say, because a lot of people have seen him use artificial lights, until we started traveling for him to teach workshops, he had never used artificial light. And when we went on the first workshop tour, he was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I'm going to be in all these weird buildings. Some of them don't even have windows. Other ones have terrible windows. And some of it might be at night. What am I going to do? So he found he always used these light poles that he got off of Amazon, and they came with daylight bulbs, which he did not like because they were too cold. So he put halogen spotlights in the light poles, and that's what he used only when we were in a workshop or he couldn't control the light any other way but to use them. So I'll say maybe 95% of his paintings have been done with natural light.
For the benefit of anyone who isn't an experienced painter or who's new to the podcast and hasn't heard this being discussed before, why is it important to control the light?
Well, this is interesting. I've never been asked that. I'm not sure he's ever been asked that. I think you want a light and shadow side to your paintings. They just look better, and you want to know where the light's coming from. It gives you information about the scene. So you want it coming from one direction into the next where there's shadow on one side and light on the other. You want to know about your subject. So either the light comes from above, but it's going to be obvious because you see how it casts the shadows. So you want to be, and that's the best question. I mean, it's a great question, but it's kind of hard to explain it. But you just want that to be part of what your painting is saying. You want the viewer of the painting to know as much as they can know. So letting them see where the light is coming from makes a better painting. It just creates a better painting. Dennis has one of his courses is called How to Create Paintings with Pop. And POP stands for, now I don't remember what it stands for. Powerful optical presence. because people would say that to him, your paintings just pop. And you go, what does that mean? But it means powerful optical presence. So you want to know where your light source is.
That's a fantastic answer. So sorry for putting you on the spot, but it has been discussed on the podcast before, but I know that each artist and each person who I interview will have another way of wording it, and maybe a different idea about it. So that was wonderful, and I appreciate that. Similarly, when you mentioned painting from life and not photograph, could I ask you why that would yield benefits that photographs and videos may not?
Yes. But I will also say that the only other paintings that Dennis ever did, he when we were in Louisiana, this is just to make this answer a lot longer, but when we lived in Louisiana, he loved painting water lilies. And his first artist that he loved was Monet, before he got into the French Impressionist and then the American Impressionist. So he was in love with painting. There was a lot of water lilies in Louisiana, and he painted them a lot. And then we moved to Maine and found more water lilies, and he painted more and more and more and more. And a lot of times I was next to the pond with water lilies. And then we moved to a property that had a pond, so he planted water lilies. And so it was a big part of his paintings. And then, you know, water lilies only bloom in warm weather. They're like perennial flowers. They bloom in nice, you know, and so in Maine, you've got like 2 months of water lilies. Like start in June, July, you're lucky if August too. So he would get commissions for water lilies in winter. And if you're an artist, you don't turn down commissions. You know, you figure out a way. So he started, he would have a laptop and a iPad and his memory of his paintings, not a photograph of a water lily pond, but of his paintings. And then with the new painting, the empty canvas, he would paint and his experience in his own mind. So he would put together those to create these other water lily paintings. But the reason why it's so good to paint from life is that cameras lie. They never get, they don't see in 3D. They don't see the nuances of light. And they will fool you. And when you look at paintings, and if you have experience with this, if you look at paintings, you can tell which painting was done from life and which painting was done from a photograph. You can see it. It's not as alive. There's not a whole lot that I can really explain. You kind of have to experience it. But certainly if you're an experienced artist, and it's not, I'm not saying that all art that is done from photographs is bad art, but it's just a different experience. And Dennis felt that way too. He didn't feel like people that were created from a photograph, it was bad art. That's what they wanted. But if you really wanted to learn how to paint, you needed to do it from life. And when he was teaching, he could know by the way his student approached a painting, he could know that they had always been painting from photographs because they were lost. They'd see something in front of them and they couldn't make sense of it. They couldn't see the light and dark. They could until, you know, they listened to him enough, but it was a very interesting experience. He could tell which artist had painted from photographs and which ones had painted from life. And you're at a great disadvantage if you only paint from photographs. That's the thing. It's harder for you to learn to paint if you paint from photographs. You're not seeing the real thing. You're not seeing the darks and lights in the way they really are.
Yeah.
That's the best I can explain it. He could explain this a lot better, and I certainly miss his explanations, but it's the best I can do.
No, that was a great answer. I thought that was really Very well explained. I will add on top as well is that I've noticed the color spectrum from photographs is quite limited. So I've
Yeah.
tried to photograph certain flowers, and it will turn purple into blue, and it just won't be able to find the true color. So I think painters have the edge over photography in that sense, that they can mix. If you can mix a color well, then you can find more accurate hues than what cameras often can. But no, I thought that was a very comprehensive, well answered response for me. And speaking of painting from life, I, like you, not to your extent, but like you, have modeled several times for painting and classes and things. So I'd like to go on to your experience of modeling. How did that begin? Did he ask you, or did you offer, or when did that start?
So like I said, it was when I was pregnant with our daughter, our middle child, in 1985. I think I was 32 at the time. And what is a painter going to do? I mean, he just started painting me when I was pregnant. And then he painted me when I had the baby, with the baby, holding the baby. And it just became a thing, and then it just organically grew. And, and then when our kids were little, we'd go out to the beach. After we had moved to Maine, we'd go out to the beach, not just the beach, but like a park called Fort Foster. We would go out there and take the kids with us. I would model for a painting overlooking the water with my hair up, in a white dress, and he would paint me, or at least the first day or second day. It would usually take, we'd have a big painting out. It would usually take 3 or 4 days to finish a painting. And then we would have lunch. The kids would come in, we'd have lunch. They'd go out and play again, and we would start on another painting. And we did that all summer long, because in Maine, the summers are precious. They're beautiful. It's like paradise, and it was the perfect place to paint. And then, because winter and snow and all that, well, we started painting inside. And we always liked antique furniture and vintage dishes and things like that. We loved yard sales, and we would just collect all kinds of crazy stuff. And soon it was just, I would pose in a scene that we had mocked up. Sometimes we used ideas from the Boston School of Painters, that, different poses from one of them, like Tarbell or Benson. And we actually lived, so Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where we lived in Kittery, but Portsmouth was kind of the place we loved. And we didn't know that at the time when we moved there, but the next town over, called Newcastle, New Hampshire, right on the water, is where Edmund Tarbell's summer home was. And we actually got to go to the summer home. We got to meet his daughter, and we got to go into the house and see some of the objects that we recognized from Tarbell paintings. It was remarkable, and it was so fun. And several years later, that house burned down. So it was an amazing experience we didn't even mean to. Edmund Tarbell was one of Dennis's favorite painters for years, and we didn't mean to move right across the water from where he lived, which was quite exciting. And we had been to one of the reasons we chose that area was because we had been to the Boston Museum of Fine Art and had loved some of the rooms filled with the American Impressionists. They have a wonderful collection there. And we knew, as we stood in front of those paintings, weeping because they're so beautiful, that we had studied in books, but here we were in front of the real things, weeping. We knew we had to be kind of close to Boston, and it was just an hour away from Portsmouth, and that was really wonderful. That was one of the last things after Jenny got sick. He decided he needed to go one more time. And at the time, I was too afraid to do the driving because it's a big city. And he was really too sick to do it, but he drove there to walk through those rooms one more time. Now I've done really well not to get sad, but that was, I've got pictures of him standing in front of some of his favorite paintings, and that was a great trip.
We have been working on something in the background.
We've had previous guests revisit the channel to give us additional content, everything from studio tours, sketchbook tours, talking us through the process of paintings, and all kinds of additional treats which you're exclusively going to see as a patron who supports the channel.
So by supporting us on Patreon, you help the channel keep going. There's a lot of work put into this, from the video editing to the sourcing of guests. So you really help us find those guests and to put the content out.
We have lots of content planned for the near future. So the links for that will be in the description of this video and in the description on the podcast channels. And otherwise, you can go on to Patreon and type in Painting Insights Podcast and support us that way. Thanks very much. Enjoy the video. I want to talk more about the modeling if I can, because I wanted to know how you would initiate a pose with him. Would he say, I might paint this scene, or would you mind sitting in this, or would you discuss it? Would you plan it, or would it be spontaneous? How would the modeling interaction occur?
Well, usually Dennis would have an idea, but it was just an idea that he was forming. So he'd say something like, I don't know, maybe you could put your low-cut dress on, your low-cut blouse on, and maybe the white skirt. We would just talk back and forth. Oh, do you want a sash? How about a hat? You know, we would talk back and forth, and you know, if it was good weather, we'd go outside. If it wasn't good weather, we'd do something inside. And it was just like, I want it to kind of be, and he just had it not like, I want it all white, or he'd say, I want some more contrast in this, or I want it to be quiet, or, you know, it was just, we would just bounce ideas off of. And then over the years, after I'd been modeling for many years, it was like, oh, my neck would go out, or my, you know, things would hurt, and I'm like, and I didn't age very well. I've changed my diet and I aged much better now, but it was a time where I could no longer stand in paintings because my health was declining and I wasn't as healthy. So we did more sitting down paintings, and, you know, we would just try different things, and we would just try different things until, and it was all about light too. If the light could hit, like my hair was always up, and he always wanted the light on my neck, you know, or the shoulder or something. It was always about the light. That was the important thing. So whatever he could get, whatever position he could get where the light was touching the skirt just right, or it was touching my shoulder just right, or whatever he was looking for, you know. And luckily, the last several years, I've changed my diet to a carnivore diet, and I have absolutely no aches and pains anymore. But I almost, for a couple of years, I quit because I was almost using a cane. But when I changed my diet, all my pain went away, and I was able to keep modeling. I modeled nude until I was 65 years old. And, you know, we did a lot of, well, not a lot, but, you know, maybe, I don't know what the percentage would be, but I did several nude paintings, and it was like, it didn't mean much to me because I grew up around art. I went to college, and it wasn't like I had a big audience. It was just him. And it wasn't like it was me. It was a painting of me. So I never felt self-conscious about it, except it always kept me I always stayed in shape because I had a reason to. I wanted to look good in paintings. So I had a reason to work on aging well because I wanted to keep being able to be in painting. So the last paint, I'm 70 now, but my last painting that I posed in, I was 65, 66 years old. And, we had a deal when my hair started turning gray. I said, you can't paint. So you can't paint wrinkles and you can't paint my hair gray. There's a few paintings out there with more gray hair. I don't color my hair, but when I went carnivore, I lost some of the gray. I still have quite a bit, but I lost some of the gray. So that was good. But that was our rule. And, he would give me a tummy tuck if I needed it. And I would look at the painting and say, look, I know my boobs are that low, but you can't paint them that low. So he would have to give me a
lift,
whatever, a breast lift, occasionally. So yeah, that's the privilege of being a model for a very good painter.
Well, you
some breast lifts.
Yeah, aging beautifully. It's obviously congratulations on your diet because it's obviously helping, and well done for the reduction in pain, which is amazing. So that's great to know. And I've seen certain paintings where you'd be looking in the mirror with your, doing your hair. Mm-hmm. Would you have to hold that for long? How long would you hold it for?
Well, I would hold it for as long as I could hold it. So maybe the first time it would be at least 5-10 minutes. And then, there's a whole lot more to paint in a painting. Mm. So when he was painting the background or even my skirt, I could put my arms down. And then he was like, okay, put your arms back up. So I put my arms back up. And so we just worked together, and he was always able to talk to me. I was always able to talk to him. And it was just like, we have a lot of paintings like this out at the coast where my arm is up, blocking the sun. And that gets tiring. We often thought about, creating a stick thing that I could put my arm on, but I would just do it, and he would paint as quick as he could, and then I'd bring it back down. So, yeah.
That's a clever.
But and I'd even go take a break when he was on the sky or the water. I could go take a break. I'd go sit down on a bench and drink some water. But yeah.
That's great. That is a good tip. I'd never thought of that when I was modeling for a class. I would sit there frozen. But yeah,
well, class is different. I've done that too. And a class is different because there's always somebody painting you, and you have to just say, "Okay, I need a break," and then you go take your break. But yeah, that's different.
Yeah,
and that happened too. Okay, I need a break. My hip is killing me. I need a break. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, when you said you'd pose for a class, is this one of Dennis's classes, or is it a different class you pose for?
No, it was just Dennis's classes. Sometimes in the workshop, he would be the workshop would be advertised as a flower workshop, and he would teach roses usually, or peonies. But if it was a 5-day workshop, a lot of times, because the people knew that I modeled for him, they know the figure paintings. So he would do 3 days on flowers and 2 days on me, and so I would pose for the class. But yeah, I don't think I remember. I posed a couple of times for Dennis and Del Weller, his teacher, because they sometimes painted together, and so I posed a few times for the two of them also. Yeah,
it's a wonderful thing to have as a model who's experienced and willing to do it, because I've drawn models where they've had their arms up and sometimes their arms can just drop gradually and they won't even realize it, and you'll just think, I need to either adjust or recapture what I saw, so I have to make that decision. I'm also interested to talk to you briefly about, and I say briefly because I don't want to keep you too long, but yeah, as lovely as it is talking to you, you do have a day of your own to have. So I want to ask about when you mentioned, I think earlier on, you said that you would be give him a bit of a critique. How would that work? Would he say, okay, I'm ready for it, or would you just walk in and say, I'm not sure about this, or what would it be like?
I tried really hard to wait to be asked. And there was a little bit of contention, and we had to work on how this went, you know. But usually when he finished the painting, he would bring it to me and say, what do you think? Or he could tell before I even said anything by the expression on my face. I couldn't hide it, you know, and he knew if I loved it, he was, that's great. You know, I would just be effusive. But if he'd bring a painting and put it down and I wasn't all excited, he was like, oh gosh, she doesn't like it. It was horrible. You know, so it was interesting and challenging. And it was a challenging thing that even though we tried to do it lovingly, it wasn't always easy. So yeah, you know, in every marriage, there's things you work on. That's something we worked on to try to do that better and better. I want to tell you a funny story about posing.
Okay.
So it was every day for years and years and years. We lived in Kittery, and we had a really nice big backyard, and we would put a table up and put all kind of still life objects on the table. And I would put a white dress on, and I'd have a book, and I'd sit in the afternoon after lunch, and I would pose. And our daughter thought that I'd been depressed and I needed a surprise birthday. She had never done a surprise birthday, but when I was 42, she just thought I needed a surprise birthday. And Denny said, plan it in the afternoon while I'm painting, because Mom will fall asleep. So every day he knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that I would sit there like this and I would eventually fall asleep. And he would paint the rest of the painting and then he'd wake me up. So that's exactly what happened. I sat there at the table. I fell asleep. And so he called Camille, our daughter, and said, okay, coast is clear. Y'all can come over. So all our friends came to our house, and another friend called me. Oh, okay. I answered the phone. This is before cell phones. So I guess somebody had to bring the portable phone out to me. And she says, when my daughter was here the other day, I think she left something. Can you go in and see if it's still in your house? And I'm like, well, I just cleaned the house. I know it's not there. And she goes, well, could you just go in and look? And I'm like, well, I'm sure it's not there. She had to like finally convince me to go in and look for this object. That was the big surprise. And I go in and everybody yells surprise, but it was very funny. The whole thing was, very predictable. Yes, I would fall asleep during a painting. And, after a couple of minutes, I would wake up. And that's why in every painting with a table and a book, there is tea or coffee.
It's very sweet and thoughtful of your daughter to think of that as well. For your daughters to think, right, you need a surprise birthday party to lift your spirits is very thoughtful.
Well, it worked, except it took me so long to get there. Our friends were getting very hot inside my house, waiting for me to finally come up. It was pretty funny. And that same daughter is the daughter who helped Dennis figure out how to create the courses, because she's very experienced in, creating courses and working. She's kind of like a tech expert. So she was the one who talked us into, or Denny talked Dennis into creating the courses, and that were very profitable for us for several years. So, and we still sell them. So that's pretty cool.
That's right. So your courses are available. Well, Dennis's courses are available through at the moment. They're all structured and ready for people to take advantage of, which would be a lot of knowledge that he shares, I imagine. So they're all available on your website. Is that correct?
Yes, the courses are on the perrinmethod.art.
Okay, excellent. Because they will be links in the description of the video and the audio platform for everything that we discuss as far as websites and social media and things. So we do encourage people check out the courses, because it's just amazing painting. It's beautiful body of work, and what an incredible resource to take advantage of. What we like to do on this podcast is ask the artist what their color palette is, what it consists of, what the actual colors are. Do you know the colors which Dennis used?
Yes, definitely. It's interesting. After he had painted for maybe 20 years, or almost 20 years, he had used regular oils, and he had, I think he had already come up with his method by then, but I'm not sure. He had a woman with a friend came to visit the studio, and she was a medical intuitive. And after a conversation, she came up to hug Denny, and she said, "Oh, I feel like you've got some liver damage. I don't know." And it was really a kind of a weird experience. But right after that, he decided, so the new water soluble oil paints had just come out. So he decided to start using water soluble paints, so he wouldn't have to have turpentine or other solubles around. So he switched to Winsor Newton artisan water soluble oil paints. They're still oil paints, but you can clean them up with water. And he used those paints with the medium that's called painting medium for the artisan paints. So here's his palette, because some of these colors aren't available in the other oil paints. They're, anyway, titanium white, cadmium yellow medium, cadmium red medium, cadmium red dark, alizarin crimson, occasionally rose permanent rose, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, and occasionally, if needed, the only secondary color he used was viridian. So it's a greenish color. It's perfect for getting certain intense greens on a leaf or something. And then he also used black. Now, this is one of the only times I ever disagreed with him. He used black inside with inside paintings, and didn't use ultramarine if he was using black inside. And if he was painting outside, he never used black, and instead used ultramarine. When I was taught not to use black. And I have recently started using it in my paintings. I don't really like it, but sometimes it seems like it's necessary. So I've used it occasionally. But that was like the only disagreement we ever had about painting. So I don't know. So those are his colors, and he never used any other colors except for those.
That's really interesting. I myself have the Winsor and Newton water soluble oil set as well, so I can appreciate the difference between the two. And but I found a couple of things were interesting there. I think I may be wrong, but I think I only heard one yellow and 4 shades of red, which is really interesting, because cadmium red medium, cadmium red dark, alizarin crimson, and the rose, which are,
And the rose he only used, if it was absolutely necessary, because certain colors you just couldn't get, especially of flowers. Like if you paint a red rose, you're not going to be able to get it with those other. Usually you couldn't get it with those other. You'd have to have a little of the permanent rose.
Yeah. But that's what I find interesting, is how the artist will then hone that palette to what they know is strictly necessary, and well, some artists will add wildcard colors, and I suppose in this case it'd be Viridian will be the extra color that was used for, as you said, when it's really needed. So I'd love to hear that you're still painting yourself. So are you painting with watercolor still, or are you in oil now?
No, just the oils, right? And I actually fought him about the Viridian for a long time too, until I wanted to paint some asparagus, and they didn't look like the right color. And I was like, okay, you win. Give me your Viridian, because I was using his paint. I would squeeze out the paint on my canvas and then give it all back to him, you know. So anyway, I said, okay, give me the Viridian, and you do need it for occasional things. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So,
and I have taken a huge break in painting, but I intend to get back to it. You know, I had taken 30 years of painting off when I started painting again, and painted pretty seriously for several years. Let's see, I guess about, well, I mean, I've taken a year off. I've accumulated so many paintings, and I haven't figured out how to sell my paintings. So it's hard to just keep painting when they're piling up. But I think I'm going to be doing some like outdoor festivals and farmers markets and things like that, because most of my paintings are either food or still life, and they're smaller, and you know, coffee and tea. So they were, you know, small paintings. So
yeah,
I think
fantastic. I'll be interested to see your painting as well, because that sounds lovely. But the last thing I was going to ask about as well is that are there any galleries where Dennis's work is still being exhibited?
No, we pulled them all back in. They're in storage. We do have a website. It's just dennisperrin.art. I have all, you know, there's not a lot left. That's why we pulled them in, because there's not that many paintings left, and there's not going to be another one. So we have them all, and they are for sale, and they're on the website. We also have a dennisperrinshop.com. There's tote bags and iPhone covers and laptop covers and shower curtains and things like that. So we even have some shoes and some leggings. Anyway, there's, you know, a few artist merch, as they say.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Well, that'll be shown on the screen as you're discussing it, and also, as I said earlier, the links will be in the description of the audio and the video platforms. So we do encourage everyone to check that out. Support Aimee, and obviously honouring the memory of Dennis with his beautiful work on this merchandise that you can purchase. So I think that's an amazing thing to have on offer for people to buy and to see. So is there any social media that you'd like people to go to and support you, and to enjoy Dennis's work and to discuss his work with you? Where would you like them to go?
Yes, we have Dennis Perrin Fine Art on Instagram and on Facebook. And I still post every day on both his Instagram and his Facebook. You can find me on my Instagram, Aimee Fields Perrin. It's AIMEEFIELDS on Instagram. And that's also the name of my website, aimeefieldperrin.com. And I have a YouTube channel, which is all about the carnivore diet and me and aging well. And it's called Brisket Boomers.
I love it. That's fantastic. Okay, well, as I said earlier, all the images will be on the screen. So if you're not watching, come over to the YouTube channel and see the images of what we're discussing, and explore the links in the description below, because there will be links for all of the social media accounts. And I really do encourage everyone to check that out, because we've got to support artists, and the artists who've passed as well. But it's been such a pleasure talking to you. Been very generous with your time. Thank you for being a guest on the podcast.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you very much.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you can support the podcast by leaving a like or a comment down below, that would really be great. But what we'd really like is if you're able to leave a review on the podcast channels, wherever you listen to it or download it, because that helps us get spread around the internet so that more people have access to us and able to see what we're making.
Also, follow us on Instagram, and we'd really appreciate it if you like and engage with our posts. Help get the podcast better known. Thanks for listening.